Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm the programming advisor for the animation part of the TIFF. Thank you very much. So the theme of this topic, the symposium, is the possibilities of animation expression. The reason why is that the 4 directors that are coming onto the stage, they have their own distinct career, and they grasp the possibility and appeals of animations and create their own pieces. So they probably have slightly different stance towards animation, so that we learn more about the possibilities and potentials of animation going forward. So that is why we set up this theme for this symposium. So now I would like to introduce the members. First of all, Director of Lonely Castle in the Mirror, Mr. Keiichi Hara. The Director of the Concierge, Mr. Yoshimi Itazu. The Director of In This Corner and Other Corners of the World, Mr. Sunao Katabuchi. Director of Robot Dreams, Mr. Pablo Berger. And please have a seat. Are you ready? Okay. I would like to start with Mr. Hara. Well, I see this almost full house, so I'm very impressed, and I would love to hear a lot and speak a lot as well. Thank you. And Itazu-san, please. So I'm surrounded by the great directors, and I'm pretty nervous, I have to say, but hopefully we have a good time together. Thank you. And Katabuchi-san, please. My name is Katabuchi. Hello. And Pablo-san, please.
Hi. Although this is my 4th film, is my first film as an animation director, and my film Robot Dreams is a love letter to Japanese animation. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm here to learn from the masters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to hear your stance or your approach when it comes to creating animation. How can you put appeals into your animation products or pieces? So I would like to start with Hara-san once again. So you don't want too much of a staged feeling in animation, and you started to do that completely from some point in your career. But there is very animation-like expressions, and sometimes you focus on that as well. So when it comes to animation making, what's very much like animation, or what's the unique point of animation? So the reason or the how I became a director is a live-action film. I watched so many live-action films. I loved animation. I loved manga as well. So I have certain image pieces or scene pieces that come from color live-action movies in my older times. And I am not originally an animator. That plays a big role, I guess. I think there are more directors who became from animators. So I am not like these directors who used to be animators, and the type of animation or the visual that I make will be different from those people, and I consider this as my strength. And when I look at your pieces, sometimes there's characters running towards the end, and that's like the explosion of a character. So you sometimes have that kind of impactful scenes. Are you calculating that and creating that kind of highlight in your animation piece? So the last scene or the ending scene, I try to imagine that when I first create a storyboard, like what kind of ending scene that I want to make. So as I think about that, I then start making the storyboard from the beginning. And eventually the last scene or the last frame will come to my mind. And once that's there, then I simply go towards that goal, if you will. I simply run towards that, if that makes sense. So I try to come up with a very strong last scene, not a weak one. And coming up with that, I think, is a very important thing for me. So I have a simple question. I mean, in the time of script, you don't necessarily see that, but you have to sort of see the visual more. That is correct. So when I do some one-off piece, like not a sequel, then I meet with the characters for the first time when I finally start working on it. And as I progress in the storyboard, I come to understand the characters more. So because of that, those characters start to become more realistic and they become more clear to me. And what I imagine, my mind actually is a live action scenes rather than animation. This may sound weird, but so that's probably different from other directors. Thank you very much. I would like to ask Katabuchi-san. You are not originally an animator either, but looking at your past ones, there's an action recorder use in your past films, and you control the motion so that you can create the tone of the movie. And I'm sure you have certain points that you are particular about. Is it important?
Well, in terms of the movement, well, actually, we actually draw on papers and we peruse, and we need to be able to control the action through using the papers. But when you are doing some long shots, it gets a little complicated. And also when there are a multiple number of characters, it will be very, very complicated. And also when you think about those lines that the characters speak, that's when I leverage action recorders. So you record the papers, right? And you reproduce the movements. And doing that only in 40 seconds is actually quite difficult. And so, but if you use the action recorders, then you can really easily see those movements, and you can also share those movements with your staff members. So that's why I have started using these action recorders since 20 years back. Katabuchi-san, so the visual that you have in your head, are they like not the live actions video like what Hara-san said, but are they like the pencil, the lines that you drew with pencil, are they more like anime? I'm not really sure. Because the movements, it's very difficult for me to imagine movements. And I draw them, and that's why I can see them. Well, I can see the forms, but it's difficult to see how they would actually move. Unless you create it into a composite, you can't really see the movement. Maybe that's due to how our brains are created. So you are using pencil and paper. Is that one of the bases in creating your films? Yes. Well, but when it comes to really abstract forms, abstract movement, that might be doable. However, when people are performing and how you are trying to see the characters of each of the personalities, that could be difficult. Okay, so today I think we have the opportunity to see your latest films, the pilot video. So maybe we should take a look at that. And can we see the video, please? Thank you very much. So that was a very short trailer. And in order to create this trailer, we actually developed a new studio and we developed new animators. And those really novice people, they are actually now being able to write some cuts. So we have a diverse array of people in their careers. And I think you can't really see the differences between those novice and the seasoned people. And so we have been having lots of good advices, giving advices to each other, and they have always been confirming what they have been doing, so it was a very good environment. Now, what I thought seeing this film was that you were trying to add more presence to each character. For example, the people are pouring some water, and then at the background there are some people eating food, and there's always constantly people moving. Yeah, it's a really, really long shot. So it was very difficult for us to be thinking about how people would be moving, because when we are all making the composites, it's very intricate because we have to design who is going to be standing out in the frame. But once it's created, we actually do like a rehearsals when we don't paint the colors, and we do some rehearsals. And is that only possible because it's animation? No, maybe not. It's almost like doing a live action film. So you are actually doing that, translating that into doing that with animations. Now, at the very beginning, there are many people walking. Now, back in the Heian era, we actually try to see how people in those era would be walking, including the type of the sandals they would be wearing, and how that would be changing their movement. Thank you. Okay, now moving on to Itazu-san. Now, Itazu-san, you are originally an animator, and you actually participated in Miss Hokusai of Katabuchi-san, and so you have a long career as an animator. Now, for your case, the movement of the characters, would that become like a beacon of how you're going to develop your animation? Well, I tried to make this film like a Toei film long-form animation. So it's a bit like manga, but I wanted to make some scenes to have more realism. So throughout the film, the level of realism is different. For example, at this time, the movement is important, but in this time, the words are more important. So I have been controlling each cut in order to convey the atmosphere.
So in the late 1960s, there's certain products or things that were made in the past, like animals' kingdoms and things like that. And I think there are certain variations or the different styles trend at the time. So those past things like Puss in Boots or Animal Treasure Island, you take certain things in and then you make judgment as to what you want to use this time. So I watch many animation films before becoming an animator, so I kind of know what animation feels like. But when I want to draw, I have to come back to the real situation. I see the real movements and everything and double check that. So I believe historically, animators look at this and then made it more abstract, with etc. And that's what I've been seeing. So I confirm that, and then I come back to my actual work. So, and it becomes somehow my style eventually. So there's that style, and then as a director, when you create a long-form film, Are these things closely connected? Yeah, I would say so. So if there's an original piece before the film, and then also in the case of what I want to make something original, but the biggest thing is that whether I have fun drawing, if it's just hard and it's just difficult to do that for 2-3 years without fun. And also, it's not that I see a huge vision from the beginning, but then when I draw or create, I feel like, okay, the audience would enjoy this. So I think the people in production have to have fun, and otherwise the staff members' feelings or mood don't go up either. I would like to ask you, Pablo-san. So originally you filmed some live-action films, and especially Blancanieves, for example, is the monochrome silent movie style that you took up. So someone like you, why did you want to make animation films?
Thank you for your question, but first I have to say that I'm moved with Katabuchi trailer. I want to see his film very badly. About your question, the reason why I want to make this film, Robot Dreams, is because I read the graphic novel that is based on, and I had fun. I was surprised, but when I got to the end of the graphic novel, I was moved. I was in tears. In a way, I closed my eyes and I could see the film finish. And that's the only reason I wanted to make animation, because I never thought I was going to be an animation director. And if I wanted to make a story with anthropomorphic characters, and I wanted to tell this story, because the only reason I want to make this film, because the story moved me and made me think about people that I lost, and in people that they're not with me, and all those things together made me the challenge to make an animation film.
ただ実際に
Right, but when it comes to actual production, you need staff members and people who can sort of translate your vision into the movie. So that kind of thing would be somewhat different from what you do with live action films. So how was it?
Hara-san, you know, I'm not an artist. I come from live action, so I needed to get a great animation director. And in my case, I was working with Benoit Ferremont. He worked in the Triplets of Belleville with Sylvain Chomet, and I like Sylvain Chomet's style very much. So he's the one that came to Madrid for 2 years. He put together a team of great animators from all Europe. In a way, it was a little bit like Kurosawa's film Seven Samurais. We needed like a good samurai, like Benoit, and he will find, even with maybe not very experienced animators, he will make great animators. I agree with Katabuchi very much. We had a team with some very experienced, but some very young animators. And if they were motivated and if they liked the story and they were treated right, we really create this kind of army with samurais in the front, but then, and that was very, very good. And also, I thought it was going to be very different from live action, and I felt very comfortable working animation, extremely comfortable. The only big difference is that instead of working with actors, I was working with animators. And in a way, I just had to be patient, and that's something that is a quality of mine as a director. I think it's like, animation is like live action, but in a slow motion.
辛抱強さが必要だ。
Right, so you need patience, you said, and other directors were nodding their heads.
I think live action directors in general, they're not patient, but I have made 5 films in 20 years. So 5 years is a good pregnancy for me. It's a slow cooking for a film, and I feel very comfortable in the 5 years per film.
はいはい。ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. So now I would like to ask Hara-san. You are a live action film as well, and I believe you see good things and bad things with the dawn of a filmmaker. So what was the good point of the live action film? So we tend to work based on schedule, and we finish work based on schedule. I mean, it sounds like a given, but it's not always. So because we book certain people like actors and staff members, and you have clear period of time in which you have to finish work. And during that time, your schedule is pretty packed and tight. And it's to the point or degree that I would not do this ever again. But once I'm done, I somehow wanted to do that again. And live action films, of course, have cameras. So what does the camera film, or who does it film? And how does it move? And based on that, other staff members really work hard, right? They just put something out of the way or hide it. And at the time, I felt that, live action films are all about subtracting or removing what's unnecessary from that shot. But animation is like a blank slate, and you add things, like draw a line, you color it, you put the background. So it's more of an addition or adding. So that difference came to my mind. I mean, both have good and bad points, of course. The current working sites of Japanese animation films are really bad, I have to say. Really tragic, I would even say, because people do not keep the schedule, like the drawing doesn't come up, that type of thing. Schedule non-compliance is becoming a huge issue at all the studios pretty much. And people feel like, do we need to do this much, or do we need to make this much? But sometimes we have a mega hit animation film once in a while. That's why people still want to make that, and that's something that we have to work on.
So from what I've heard, to Hara-san, in animation, it's very important, or actually hard, to create the construct from your storyboard. But when it comes to live action film, it's very easy once you have a very good cinematographer. That's right. And in terms of the location, when you do live action films, you're really very much impacted by the weather, and also the time that the sun is shining is very limited, so everyone rushes. So when you're shooting one scene, first of all, what you do is the cinematographer will decide on where he's going to place the camera. He's going to stand at one point, and then the other staff members will understand what they need to do. And so they will get on with their job, and the camera will be there, and the actors will be there, and we do a light rehearsal, and the cinematographer will decide on the height or decide on the lens. And that flow is really, really superb. It's very beautiful. So that's the difference. And you feel that the difference is so huge. Yes, that's right. So in recent years, there are many young animators who cannot draw layout because they are not experienced. So the proper way of drawing the background, some people cannot do that. And some people say, can I substitute the background with things? And I say, no, that's for me to decide, not for you to decide. So sometimes I really get, it gets me mad. So that means the way you create the environment or the space is very different. And in terms of the animation, you have some stringency in the human resource. So if you create the layout, then you can make a very precise environment. So with a certain millimeters camera, and you will be having this angle, it will be very specific. And based on that line, then you can place your characters. So it's very precise. But I think animators should also write the background, not just the characters. So Itazu-san, actually, he can draw layouts. So he can draw realistic layouts. And also some rough, simplified layouts. He can do both. And I think that's what's needed in an animator. So those traits are being lost these days. So it's very important to have the impression on the cut. It's not really about precision. It's about the impression that is described in the storyboard that should be translated into a drawing so that you can color them and add your impression and pass it on to the next animators. So it's like, yeah, this is what I feel, isn't it? That's really important that you need to convey to the other animators. And I think that is a trait that is becoming very hard to educate. So the handwritten layouts may not be that precise. However, that's where the flavor or the atmosphere comes in, and that is the animation. It might be a lie, but it's going to be a white lie, a good line. Katabuchi-san, in terms of the good layout, so in terms of the live action film, it's about where you place your camera, and that's how you make the impression. But you know what? There aren't so many people who can do that. There are only very limited people who can do that. But if we can have some more people who can do that and have those people think that I also want to do that, I think that's very important to have new people to start thinking that they want to do that. And now it's really important that you don't place the precision too much, but you want to have the more the atmosphere or the emotion that is being infused in that. Now, this is a picture. There's snow in the background. Realistically, this is not correct, but this really shows the emotions. And I think this really will be building people's technique to see what they should be doing in the future. And I know people don't have time right now, but you really have to do that right now in order for you to really develop yourself. So in our studio, we don't use tablets, we use papers. From the white slate board, you use your pencils. So that I hope that everyone would understand that they are drawing something. Yes, hand-drawn animation techniques are being lost these days. But when that goes on, and people might think that, okay, whatever we draw, that's fine. But I think that's not correct. We really, as Katabuchi-san has mentioned, there are only a very, very limited number of animators who can draw superb drawings, who can be seen in large theaters, and those people's work are just magnificent. They are incredible. So these days, there are fewer people who use paper and pencil, but people like Inoue Toshiyuki, he actually uses paper and pencil. And so for this film, when I went to the studio, at the entrance, the producer was saying, we have the Inoue-san's original work, and we were just I was just mad that the staff members actually saw Inoue-san drawing before me. I mean, I have the privilege to see the best in the best. I should be the first on the team, and my staff members were actually touching those papers, and it's like, that's such an insult. I got so mad. So, for example, when you receive a really important message, you actually should be thinking, I have to clean my hands, wash my hands, and touch the paper and give it to you. I was really interested in what Pablo said. You said it's like treating slow motion films. So for me, it's the other way around, actually. With the actors, we do some dubbing. So normally I am drawing, but when I'm doing some dubbing with the actors, the time flies so fast. So it was actually the opposite way. So I have a question to you. You have your vision, and when you are asking the vision to your animators, how do you do that? Are there anyone who you rely on? Are there any partners in the animation team who can convey your thoughts? How did it work?
First of all, I spend long time with the storyboard and the animatic. That's for me, it's something that the director is responsible of, where to put the camera, and a lot of the acting is in the animatic. So I don't move to the next step until I have the whole film in the storyboard. I don't like to do storyboard animation, a little bit more storyboard. I like to have the whole storyboard finished, so we spent 1 year with that. And when that was finished, as a director, where I get extremely involved is in the layout. I work so close with the layout with the director of animation and the Seven Samurais. Now, for me, the Seven Samurais are the lead animators. That for me are the protagonists of a live-action film. So, in my space, which is in the center of the studio, they will come and we will work scene by scene with looking at the layout with the animation director and with the animators. And until I don't get it right, I wouldn't stop the layout. The layout will have to come back to me until I feel it's ready. And of course, in my film, I had a very close team. That is, the art director was very close to me because I don't draw. I'm not an artist. And I also have my closest collaborator that is she's Japanese, Yuko Harami, so we were in the same space. So the directors, we don't have answers for everything. And it's very nice when you have people that you trust and they can give you, we call it the oracle. So it's not only the director also has to listen to people that you trust.
So maybe intentionally, but this handwritten style that you wanted to take up, and because that, well, is that certain media that shows more of that each person's skill more clearly?
Is that Japanese animation industry, it's very special. Of course, because it's all hand-drawn. But in Europe and the States, it's all 3D. So for me to make a Spanish-French co-production with hand-drawn artists, it was very difficult to put the team. But I love manga. I love bande dessinée. I love comics. So it's based in a comic book. So I wanted to keep the spirit of the honest line with imperfections. And I also kept everything in focus. Like when you read a manga, everything is in focus. So there's I wanted that the audience, when they watch the film, it would be like a manga, but in movement, because I love manga. So it's just, it was very important that it look every frame like it was done by a comic book artist.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. So in this talk sessions flow, we talked about layout or how we create frames. So I want to expand on that a little bit. Now, these 4 films from you, we have some symbolic space, or there's much reality in the space that the characters are in. That's what I felt from the 4 movies. So how you utilize these spaces? How do you create realistic spaces? I mean, there's layout or technical issues, but outside of that, you have certain directions that you can incorporate so that those scenes will be more believable. So in order to create appealing spaces, maybe I would ask Itazu-san first. So your film is set in the department store, right? So we said this, let's actively lie, if that makes sense. I wouldn't call it a theme, but if we are to use 3D and create this is here, that is here, these are linked here, and here's the type of space, we need to set all of these things to be able to draw that. But in case of hand drawing, I mean, you kind of draw that, and then it sort of makes sense if a good, capable person is doing that. So we didn't really decide everything in the setting, and once you can sort of see in the different spaces, you could still see that it's in the same department, and there was art element that made it possible. So we didn't really strictly think about how these visuals are connected. I mean, there are scenes that we did, but it's not all the time. And by making some space a bit ambiguous, the audience would get the impression that this is a very large, spacious place. So that's what I thought when creating spaces. So as long as each scene looks appealing, that's good. Right. Each scene or each shot has the characters there. And if that particular shot looks very appealing, then there might be a difference from the previous shot a little bit, but that's okay. So in that sense, it's loose, but then you have to have a good sense to make the whole thing look nice. That's tough. Yes, that's very tough. I mean, if there's a setting, then we simply give that and then say draw based on this. But making setting itself is a lot of work as well. So in this, there are many locations that come in only several shots. So detailing everything in every space is so difficult. So when I create storyboard, I draw this, and then I create keyframe, and then give that to the next process person. It's not that I wanted to do that, but it ended up that way, I should say. So if you pursue interestingness of the graphic, then it would be sometimes difficult to share that with the other staff members. Right, Katabuchi-san. So in the pilot film, that was about the Heian era, and you, of course, had spaces in that era. And in this corner of the world, of course, you had the city of Kure in Hiroshima Prefecture. So how did you draw these scenes? So in this corner movie, we tried to draw the buildings that existed in reality as realistic as possible. So when we have the huge ship, Yamato, I mean, even if it's 260 some meters, that warship may still look small compared to the entire town. So what do? We said. And if you actually go to the place, you would actually see that. And that's how we wanted to make. And in this Heian era, in the new The Morning Children movie, there's 5th Street, and then there's like a lot of buildings along with that street for 100 meters. So it could be very boring scene, I thought. But if you actually go to actual Kyoto, there's pretty steep slope. I mean, when you see the Heian city model, it doesn't look like slopes, but there's many slopes. Then what does happen when there's slopes? Then we have some steps, or the buildings are on the different levels, depending on where that is. Then that totally changes how that view looks like. So we are still working on it, and fortunately, most of that hadn't started when we had that epiphany moment, so that was good. So when we try to create something that's real, we found this interesting characteristic of the space, which is very interesting. So by looking into actual things, facts, and true views, then you find out some scenes of actual towns, and that gives power to the movie, you think. So in that sense, looking into this or investigating, then there is no limit if you are to really do that. But there are certain moments when I feel like this is exactly the filmmaking process. So I would like to ask Pablo-san now. So the Sarah Varon's original piece, I don't think the setting was necessarily New York in that, but in this movie, you actually set that in the city of New York in 1980s. The dog lives in East Village, so you identified that, or you decided that. So how did you select that space or the city?
You're right. In the graphic novel, it's a city. It's an American city, but it's not clear that it's New York. But for me, it was so important that the protagonists of this film would be robot, dog, and New York City. As I said at the beginning, this film is a love letter to New York in the 80s, so we had it to be very precise and specific and detailed. I like the idea that cinema is like a travel machine. I like that the audience, when they sit down in their seat and they watch the film, they travel in time, and I wanted the audience to travel in time to 1980s New York. But from the whole team, 200 people that work on the film, only 2 really knew New York. That is Yuko Harami, my collaborator, and me, that we lived 10 years in New York. So I was so involved with the storyboard and the animatic and working with the animators. So Yuko was working with the art director to really guide him to make very realistic New York. Everything, here you see Sabret. Sabret is one of the very popular brand of hot dogs, and those ads that appear had to be very specific. So everything had to be very carefully done. For example, the apartment of Dog, the protagonist, is the last apartment that Yuko and I, we live together in New York. So there are many things that are very close, and we wanted to share the experience. It's kind of like, definitely there's an element of nostalgia about a New York that disappeared. New York in the 80s was the cultural and economical capital in the world. Now the skyline, everything has changed. But I want the experience that some people that didn't know New York in the 80s and 90s, with this film, they could just see it at least for 1 hour and a half.
トラベルマシンであるっていうの
So about the travel machine, Katabuchi-san also has a very similar thought process. Yeah, it's almost the same. We share the same idea. So Katabuchi-san, what do you think hearing from Pablo-san? The really important thing is that it's the 80s, I think. Because right now, we can go to somewhere and we can go and take videos, but somewhere that it's gone. But in the creator, you are still retaining that atmosphere and you are expressing that through your work. That is really great. That's something very unique to animation, that you use your imagination. Thank you. So Hara-san, The Lonely Castle in the Mirror is your film, and the stage is in a castle. How did you come about with this idea? Well, there is a novel as an original work, and in the novel, there are some descriptions about the castle. But they weren't very specific. So I thought, how should it look from the outside? And in the novel, it simply says that you look down from the castle, there are some clouds. And so you cannot see the ground from the castle. And so I wondered, what should I do? And I was watching TV one day, and it was about the World Heritage. And in Australia, in the seashore, there was a really tall, about 200 meters high, a really, really tall rock tower was in Australia. And when I watched that, I thought, this is it. I'm going to create a castle on top of that huge rock. So that's how I decided on the exterior. And so is that why you have the sea surrounding the castle? That's correct. It's known as a Bull's Pyramid. The view was magnificent. It is amazing. I couldn't go for location hunting, unfortunately. But for each work, the stage or the time setting is different. So the way I approach it would be different. And Itazu-san did Miss Hokusai. He did the character building. The stage is in the Edo era. And we really had a difficult time because almost nothing we can see from the Edo period. They're all gone. So I really read the original work of Miss Hokusai, but there are so many things that's not really written, so we needed to imagine how things were. And also, at the end of the Edo period, we had some pictures of some foreigners who visited Japan at that period of time. And I also saw some ukiyo-e pictures, the woodblock pictures. But we said, why is ukiyo-e pictures so deformed? Yeah, the size of things are just so deformed and so altered. So the Western realism was not introduced in Japan when ukiyo-e was drawn. And so people back in the day drew ukiyo-e saying that this is what's happening, this is what people like. Yeah, it's like a pop art. So I also thought that it's really important not to really make things refined, because if you try to do that, it would look very phony. But I really felt maybe for one thing, maybe in the Edo period, I really hope that one person would draw something with realism. Well, there are some unrolled pictures in the Heian period. For example, in the Genji Monogatari or Makura no Soshi, they are not accurate. So we can see that since the Heian period, people had been deforming things, and then the people in the latter days would be copying it, and they would add their own interpretations. But when it comes to the Bakumatsu, the end of the Edo period, then people start having this eyes for precision, and they start to do some research. So with Miss Hokusai, there's a bridge called Ryokokubashi, and it's depicted in ukiyo-e pictures, but when you look at all of them, they all look different. The sizes are different, although they're all drawing the same bridge. That's a nuisance. So I'd like to start wrapping up. So in many parts of the world, people have started creating long-form animations, and we're seeing many methods. For example, like animation documentary has started. And also within Japan, in terms of animation creation, when you copy something and copying it, then it comes like a baroque. It's a really complicated situation in Japan. Now, my question to you all is that, are there any new possibilities in animations? What do you think are the pristine, untouched areas of animation? What do you think they are? Okay, maybe I'd like to start with Katabuchi-san, who's creating his new work. Well, I'm doing everything that is new for me. So I'm having a very difficult time, actually. The pristine areas is like something that is really new. And I asked An Jeffen, and An Jeffen said that he's in the center of the animation world. And then I said, no, you're not. You are the abnormal type. And so I said, because you're an abnormal and you think that you're in the center of the world, that's why you're actually expanding the world of animation. And he is actually broadening the scope of animation. So doing what other people won't do will be hopefully become some benefit to people who will be coming to our world. Okay, what about you, Hara-san? Well, currently, creating animation is becoming very, very particular and very tedious because you can do so many things, including 3D. And in terms of the background, the art, It's almost like photographs. And I don't actually think that it's a positive thing. And when the density of the background is becoming more refined, I don't really like it, but actually at the same time, I'm loving it. So it's very difficult for me to strike a balance. So, for example, this picture, this was drawn by Inoue Toshiyuki-san. This girl is running, and the camera is scrolling around her. It's a really, really wonderful technique. It's a full-on animation. So such techniques should be retained. At the same time, the animator's skill sets to draw animation should also be enhanced so that the younger people would be motivated to draw those layouts themselves proactively. And where realism goes in the end, I think it will be kind of boring because it won't be animation.
So how real can we be in animation, I guess? And this is just my personal finding, and I'm not even a researcher, and it's just my personal opinion, and that's how you should listen to this as well. But having reality in animation, that actually started with Miyazaki's piece. And there's this 100 yen lighter that comes in that animation film. So he just put what realistically exists as is in the animation film. So I watched that, and in this movie, Lupin took out this 100 yen lighter, and I actually find this as a defining moment to change the history of the Japanese animation. Lupin III, when it had the first piece in 1971, the proposal mentioned something like that. Like, whatever the existing brands come, tobacco brand, car brand, we clearly depict that. So actually, this piece is sort of a parody. Like, okay, if that's the case, Coke and cup noodles brands should show up as well. So there's actually a long history of that thought and parody. So compared to Zippo, 100 yen lighter would be new, Miyazaki-san thought, probably. But Zippo didn't even exist either. So I think if you look back, there's this baseball animation, and they actually put Yomiuri Giants. That's the team name, and that was the first time they actually showed a real name. And there was live action part as well. And then Tamagawa Ground came in, the Koshien baseball field came in. So all these real names and real things came in. In the latter half of the 60s and 70s, the realism became one goal of the expression. So in the Lupin pieces, actual cars come, right? So Hara-san, do you feel like we've finished pursuing realism, or is it still your dilemma? Well, I'm kind of struggling still, because having what I said, then I don't believe we should go back before that realism. My company was at CA movie, and we were making movies mainly for kids. So clothes and shoes, there was no reality at all. It was depicted simply with simple lines, right? So you just draw several lines, and that's a shoe. But from some point in time, animators started to ask for setting. Like, tell me what this is, or do you have any materials or documents? But I'm like, just think on your own, or don't just think setting of a doorknob. Like, what is the thing that you're holding? You don't even know what the doorknob is. That kind of conversation went on. But people now have this feeling that they always have something to refer to when they draw something, right? So Hara-san, in the future, we cannot go back to the simple time, but we don't want to be more realistic. So yeah, I think each time we just decide and everything. But in terms of your movie, Lonely Castle in the Mirror, it's more towards the animation type of tone, right? In terms of character design, right? And you use blue for somebody's hair for the first time. Yeah, I mean, it stunned me when I first saw that. Like, is it blue hair? I finally came to make somebody's hair blue. That's the feeling that I had. So there was black hair picture as well, but I felt that this dark blue suits her more. So that was an adventure in my sense. So you debate and you sway, and then you are sort of finding the future in that process, right? So film by film, I think I will try to make the right decision or the best decision. That would be my approach.
まあ様々
I would like to ask Pablo-san. So there's many animation films in the world. There are many different styles, and you participate in this festival, and you participate in the sense of animation. Where do you see the possibilities in animation going forward now that you actually made one animation film?
Endless. For me as a director, it opened a new world. If I had made this film with actors instead of animation, I couldn't have made that because it would have cost $200 million. Okay? But actually, with the reduced budget compared to live action, I was able to make it. So I think I repeat the words of Guillermo del Toro when he received the Oscar. He said, animation is not a genre, it's a medium. So for me as a director, it opened a new world. I'm sure I will repeat to tell amazing stories. I think there is no limit to imagination, so there is no limit to imagination. And I think, honestly, if we want to do something new, we always have to look to the past. So I think now when we still do hand drawing, and I think it's still amazing, and if we see like movies like Spider-Man, they're doing 3D but imitating hand drawing. So it's something they realize after 20 years of making 3D that maybe to express emotion, 2D is much more powerful. And I will use an analogy. You know, we all love tea, and what do we prefer? Like a cup made by an artisan or like an industrial cup? I honestly prefer to drink tea if I can feel the artisan. So I think hand-drawn, it has that human touch. It's the perfection of the imperfection.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Itazu-san, so he actually, Pablo-san talked about a lot of things too, and now that you finished, you made a long-form film, where do you see the possibilities? So it's somewhat similar to what Pablo-san just said, but what I think the core of animation is like the body element of that, or the physicality maybe. I think someone who draws that, there's an image, there's an impression, and you take a look at a lot of things, and then you take that into your body, like digest, and then give something out, which means drawing. And somebody who watched that sort of relate to that. And that's how people feel very pleasant or comfortable or fun. So I think no matter what it is, I think that remains the core of animation. When it comes to this particular film that I made this time, because we didn't go too realistic, we were able to convey what we wanted to convey. So it's not a theme per se, but if we go towards that direction, then I think it would echo with more people. So when I watched Robot Dreams, the dog at the beginning was playing a video game, and that his posture and by hand moving, there are certain pleasant feelings that I got or I was able to relate to some of what he was doing. And that's the impression that live action film cannot necessarily give, because there's a cute element in that scene at the same time. So that is the root of the possibility? Yes, I think so. And it remains, and I think it will remain as well. So that physicality part is very important. It's drawing, but there's physicality that's shown. I think it's almost like pantomime or the silent movement. People move hands as if there's a wall, even though there's not a wall. So there's something physical that's there, even though that doesn't exist. That's what they act. So in animation, you can feel something physical, even though that's not there. So in your concierge movie, there were people with like really long hands and legs, and those were very specific. The design was very specific. So I had the intention to move these people. So that's how we design, and that's how we can design. Then there's a good showing.
Us that we are here, we are directors, but more than directors, we are magicians, and it's a magic act. Sometimes we don't know how we do it. There's so many things involved, and we want that we like the idea that we are in a circus, and you as an audience, you get really and I think that's why we like to make movies.
どうもありがとうございます。今のお話で。
Thank you. So that concludes this panel. Thank you so much. And now I would like to take some questions from the floor. Thank you for a very great discussion. I have one question. Otsuka Yasuo-san, I think, is also among the greatest animators. And he said that animation needs to have full expressions. You shouldn't be relying on words. The character, that's because the character is living and the characters are moving. Now going forward with 3Ds, and I'm sure there will be more like technical movements induced by machines. And even though there's singularity coming in the future with technology and AI, the characters who are moving, who are living, and animation is like creating one from zero. And I think that if you can retain this 0 to 1, animation can thrive even though there will be singularity. What do you think? Well, I think it all depends on whether you all love what we do. So if people think that, oh, it's a picture, but it's moving, and when people love that, then what we do, we would be more motivated in doing something new. And Otsuka-san, I think he was saying that if we do not incorporate something new, then we will become like a very traditional art, and that shouldn't be okay. Okay, Hara-san, what's your take? When I was a child, I saw some animations, and I still remember certain scenes, quite a few actually. Back in the day, I didn't even know who drew them. But in terms of our generation, as we mentioned about the TV animation, The Star of Giants, Kyojin no Hoshi, the main character, Huma Hoshi, he invents the die league ball number 1. That's a technique. And that's how he takes strikes. And there's a rival called Hanagata Mitsuru. He's also a pitcher, and he also does a really actually he was a batter, and he actually got a home run from the league ball, the big league ball number 1. And that animation was really great. And it was aired on Sunday, and the next day, on Monday, when we all went back to school, everyone was mimicking how we could draw like that. We were all really excited. And so as long as we still retain that kind of techniques, then I think there's a reason for anime to stay in the limelight. So Katabuchi-san, you said that we also really need to continue giving such wows to audience. It was really great, wasn't it? Because, and also the spectators they became a triangle. You know, it's a really famous cut, and the ball would be smoking. Now, Pablo, even though there would be lots of technologies or techniques incorporated, and you as being like an outsider of an animation world, what do you think would be the way for animation to continue thriving?
I think there's so many possibilities of animation. That's why I insist of the animation is a medium, not a genre, because I made hand-drawing animation, but I love stop motion animation, for example. And you can do animation in so many variety of ways, and that opens the technique to so many possibilities, especially somebody like me. I'm not an artist, I don't draw, but I like to collaborate with different artists. So in that sense, I think there is no limit. I think it's like I insist in the analogy with the circus. We want to surprise. As a director, I want that all the audience go, wow. And every time I make a film, I try to surprise the audience that follow my career. So, I think we just have to be prepared. And there's, we have certain age. We have made many films, but there are so many young people coming behind, and they're coming very fast with new ideas and new possibilities. So I think it's very exciting. But I still think, fortunately for all of us that we do hand-drawn animation, still there's many things that we can express by hand-drawn animation.
はい。ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Itazu-san, what's your take? In terms of Kyojin no Hoshi, the Star of Giants, if we do that, it would be like a parody. But back in the day, the elementary school students thought it was a reality. They really wanted to do that. But probably what we are doing right now might be taken as a parody in a decade or so. We don't know. But as a director, I would like to come up with those things that might be ascertained as a parody in the future. And now I would also like to create something new, because when we discovered something new, it's like, yeah. And I think animation is a media that we can do that a lot. And there is a distance when we're animation, but sometimes the distance is narrowed with animation. Okay, one more person. I'd like to ask about the voice, because no one was mentioning about the voice. The animation is artificial, and also the human voice, something natural, is blending. But for example, like the sorrow Belladonna, and Mari-san was acting in a way that we have never heard before. And I asked, why was this Mari-san, who was making who was a voice actor, could create such a voice? And she was saying that she is an actor. And listening to this symposium, I also think that anime is about what kind of voice that you're going to incorporate into the anime. So I would also like to ask about what you think about the possibilities of voices in animations. Okay, Pablo-san, although there were no lines, maybe I would like to start with you.
理由もあればいいかなと思います。
Be the reasons why there were no lines in your characters, I would like to ask that as well.
No dialogue. There's sound, but there's no dialogue. And in the graphic novel, it's a graphic novel without dialogue. I even had made another feature film before called Blancanieves that had no dialogue, that it was a homage to silent cinema. I feel writing with images is what makes cinema a unique art form, a sensorial art form. But I agree with you that the voices are very important. And I will go further. The sound is very important. The sound design. For example, in my film, the sound design, we spent almost 9 months working a team just to create a sound. And sound creates a lot of dimension. It's not only about the animation and the artist, it's about the sound designer and, as you said, about the voice of the actors. So it's very, very important. The sound, and I will add the music. I think, of course, we only talk about many times about animation, but a film has many parts, and I think voice, sound design, and music, and composition, how you integrate animation and background. For me, that was such a big lesson that so there are many aspects that create the idea of the illusion of life, because at the end, animation is an illusion of life.
ありがとうございます。じゃあ、
Thank you very much. Katabuchi-san, regarding voice acting, what do you think? Itazu-san, what do you think? Oh, I didn't think my turn would come right away. But Itazu-san, you started as an animator, and how did you think of a voice? When I'm writing a storyboard, I recognize voice as like a sound or what we call SE. Here, until here, it's a line, there's SE, and then there's another line. From here, there's music. So it's all sound. We actually design animation motion in sound, so it's lines are almost like a sound that start at a certain timing. So at the time of storyboard making, rather than voice actors, lines are recognized as sound for me. So it's not lively yet. But when I go to the dubbing workplace, those voice actors make this lively, right? And the current Japanese production level is very high. So they create sound, and also based on the pause between the sound, they have the techniques to act. I mean, in the past, animation acting, it was so much like animation, but nowadays it's more realistic. They can act in their voice, and you feel some physicality there, and you need to follow certain pause, of course, and then so they fit that. But sometimes they just go a little beyond that pause intentionally. So I think the current Japanese production level is very high. What do you think? Oh, okay, and back to me, I guess. So in the past, it was all film, and somebody's mouth is moving, and how can you dub to suit that or match that? But the movie making itself became more digitalized now, so that people just dub, but the actual videos are not making. Or sometimes if it's lip syncing, they just modify that later. So even if they go beyond the pause, that's sort of interesting sometimes. And if that line stands well, then that's fine. And we say we fix that. In the past, it was supposed to be like completely fitting that pause or the movement of the mouth movement of the character, and that was called like a secret technique of a voice actor. But we say that you can prioritize acting, and that's okay. And if that acting shines, then we fix that later. If that reaches the entire product, then we will change the lip syncing animation, which is shooting my foot.
I would just like to add, for me as a European film director, I always was looking at the acting of Japanese animation. Excellent acting, really much more dimensional, much more natural, less overacting. In a lot of in American and European, not all, but there are many overacting. And something I see about your work and a lot of Japanese work, and of course the master Miyazaki and Takahata, it's a very emotional, small little things instead of big things that is like more like a American and European animation, you know. So you are very good actors, directors in Japan, animators, animation director.
ありがとうございます。原さんはいかがですか？
Thank you very much, Hara-san. What do you think about voice acting? Of course it's important, but in my film, we often use actors rather than voice actors. But there are definitely scenes where we need voice actors. So in this film, this time, we actually had some help of the voice actors that are long-timers. Now, these characters are middle school kids, so I wanted to have someone whose age is close to the actual characters. And people who haven't been involved in animation so much, that's something I wanted during the casting. And the biggest thing was that if you think about the natural voice that would come from that character, who has that voice? That was the criteria to select the voice actors. So I mean, sometimes I work with this actor all the time, Kumiko Aso. She's always there, and I have that particular thing that I would like to work with her. But then when it comes to voice actors, I watched many animation films, so maybe it's different from what Katabuchi-san said, but some voice actors were talking even though the lip syncing or the movement of the character doesn't match. So there were certain voice actors who were doing that, and it was hilarious to watch that. So there's this series called Time Bokan in Japan. There's this evil or bad character, Boyaki, right? And played by Yanami Joji-san. So when he pressed the button, he actually said pochi, sort of imitating the sound of pressing the button. And I think it was ad-lib, but it sort of became pretty popular among the watchers. So sometimes these voice actors' ad-libs give us a burst of laugh. There were that kind of voice actors as well. And in live-action films, Jackie Chan's voice is done by Ishimaru-san in Japan. If you listen to Jackie Chan's real voice, you feel like it's a fake because you believe that Ishimaru-san's voice is a true voice of Jackie Chan sometimes. So there are many capable voice actors as well. And I was lucky to have worked with these voice actors. So I feel lucky and happy. So what Hara-san said, realism and something artistic, you are still like swaying between these things. It was definitely like that. Yes, you're right. So what is my style? I'm still thinking. I realize that. So that is why when people see me, they don't know who I am. No, that's the interesting part of you, actually. Thank you very much. And that's what people want to see. Okay, with that, I think the time has come. So thank you very much for your participation.